Well, for more on environmental protection in China, I spoke to Jennifer Turner, director of the China Environment Forum at the Woodrow Wilson Center. I started by asking why Chinese President and CPC Secretary General Xi Jinping added the word beautiful in his describing his vision for China.
I mean, it is kind of a code word down below saying, we do want blue skies, we do want clear water. But ultimately, we have to really look at, well, what are the kinds of policies and on-the-ground action that we're seeing? And we are really seeing some changes in the last year or so in China. I mean, my favorite is these environmental protection blitzes. Have you heard of these? These investigations where the Ministry of Environmental Protection it's going down to factories, something like tens of thousands of factories have been, some of them shut down for short or longer periods. They're going down the supply chain, which I think international companies should pay attention to, because they're going down and they're not only looking at the kinds of emissions, but looking at the kinds of chemicals and things that are being put into the products and actually forbidding some. And now a blitz is a blitz, a supervisory blitz can be short term, but they're actually looking to institutionalize this.
Indeed. It's interesting because a lot of corporations at first were kind of worried about the inspections. They were saying that there was an impact, but actually the environmental minister said that while some corporations are feeling the pinch short term, in the longer term it actually works out. He said that strengthening environmental protection goes hand in hand with economic development. Why is it so important to look at that correlation?
Well, I think the is that they've been seeing over the past 30 years as the air gets worse, the soil gets worse, the water, that it hurts them economically, because you do have companies, and you've had people here on your show talking about that, oh, we don't know if we want to invest, how can we get clean water? Our employees don't want to work there. But public protest, I mean, all of that kind of adds up to a calculus for the government that, okay, environment is important. It's one of the ingredients that means that our economy can thrive. And so they've really made this pivot. I mean, and then, as we've talked about many times, the desire to decrease coal consumption in China. That is also, first and foremost, was for air protection, but they also are seeing it that, investing in renewable energy. Of course, number one investor in renewable energy, installed wind, installed solar. They capture the global market on solar PVs. And so I think that solar PV model, that the Chinese government looked at that and said, we have cleaner air and we captured a global market. And so we're starting to see China looking at, have used the electric vehicle issue.
That's right.
That just, just announcing that, yeah, 1 in 5 cars should be an alternative fuel, which translates as electric vehicles.
It's interesting because to see such high economic growth coupled with trying to curb emissions, that's not something that we've seen too often. Why do you think that's so important in this particular period of time, and especially with China's goals, and also in terms of the global efforts to really curb emissions?
Well, I think that I mean, again, they saw it as initially they needed to control air pollution for domestic issues, but then realizing particularly the coal, it's a global win too, right? Not only for creating markets for your products, but greenhouse gas emissions. And now as the Trump administration pulled very quickly back off the stage in terms of climate change, Xi Jinping, it's kind of like the spotlight's on him. It's like, well, we will step forward as a leader. And I mean, on one hand, yes, they can carry the torch. The Europeans are increasing their cooperation. I think that's what's going to be important. I mean, China became the leader with the U.S., right? We kind of both pushed ourselves to be better. Right. And with the U.S. falling off, you could really see it could all go off the rails. But now with the Europeans and the Chinese coming together, it looks promising, at least for what China wants to do domestically. But there are some worrisome trends. I mean, China, in terms of their overseas investments, I mean, a huge hunk of that is energy, and 80% of the energy investments overseas is for fossil fuels, particularly coal.
So then what are some of the trends we're seeing? We know that energy consumption and GDP growth is declining. What's happening there?
Well, I mean, the fact that, that they have been pushing to reduce coal consumption, switching to gas, starting to really let the markets kick in for energy. Not completely, but, it's looking better. And also they've done huge amounts of work over the past decade on energy efficiency in the economy. They've picked all the low-hanging fruit. They've got more work to go. But also, the economy also has been slowing down. So energy consumption is decreasing. Urbanization is, they've almost urbanized as much as they can. So energy consumption itself is starting to come down. So that also kind of turns down the heat, dare I say.
Now let's also look at some of the challenges when it comes to implementation.
Oh,
what are the big headwinds in that area?
Well, first of all, on the plus side is that, like I said, we have all these institutions that have been coming online for better enforcement. And also particularly, it's not just the Ministry of Environmental Protection, but pressure on local governments. You know, if you don't deliver on clean air, you lose your development funds. And that's a really encouraging trend. Transparency and good governance issues. It's unclear. I mean, we see in terms of the top-down regulation, China's becoming really strong, but kind of questions for in my side of the world looking at, you know, are the courts still going to be as empowered in the coming years in terms of enforcing better regulations, citizen participation in environmental policy making? There, you know, NGOs, whether or not their political space, you know, might be shrinking in general, and how that can affect environmental ones. So those are some of my concerns are more like what's going to happen on the governance side, and particularly open information.